Another perfect sunny day for a camera comparison. The Xperia 1 Mark 5 versus Xperia 1 Mark 4, and here you can see the specs: triple 12 megapixel sensors on the Mark 4 and the Mark 5 almost the same, but with an upgraded 52 megapixel sensor where you can use 48 megapixel for photos, which is quite nice, and they both feature the same kind of 12 megapixel front-facing camera. And I think we start off with the front-facing cameras. This is now the front-facing video on the Xperia 1 Mark 4, and this one here has the first upgraded sensor. Before they used an 8 megapixel sensor, 4K 30 recording, which is quite nice, good stabilization I would say. HDR is not the best, but you can still see some skies, a little bit of blue there in the sky, and some clouds there as well, which is I think quite okay. So what do you think about the front-facing video here on the Xperia 1 Mark 4? And now we are recording with the front-facing camera of the Xperia 1 Mark 5, and this one has a nice upgrade because we can record 4K 60 frames per second on the front-facing camera, which is quite nice. And you see a little bit of different colors because we have Cinetone, Sony Cinetone activated here on the front-facing camera of the Xperia 1 Mark 5. So what do you think about the stabilization? What do you think about the front-facing camera? Which one is winning here, the 1 Mark 4 or the 1 Mark 5? And now I'm recording with the main camera sensor on the Xperia 1 Mark 4, and this one has 12 megapixels, 4K 30 frames per second, but up to 120 frames per second, which is quite good, especially when you have lots and lots of motion and you want to do a slow motion out of it, which is quite nice. And we have seamless zoom, also a first that was introduced with Xperia 1 Mark 4 series, that allows us to zoom out. So I'm zooming out now to the ultra wide angle that can also record 4K 30, but also up to 4K 120 frames per second. Though sadly, of course, seamless zoom is only working I think with 30 frames per second, not with the 120 frames per second or even 60 frames per second. It's quite windy here, as you can hear already maybe and see. And yeah, what do you think about the Xperia 1 Mark 4 now? And let's try the zoom option. So we want to try to zoom on this little sign there. So we go to the 85 millimeter zoom there, which is I think 3.5 times zoom, and we can go up to 5.2 times zoom, which is 125 millimeters. And there you can see this sign. I think it's quite stable still. I can even punch in a little bit more here, which uses digital crop, 375 millimeters, which is roughly I think 15 times zoom, and you can read everything here, which is quite nice. So what do you think about this one here? So now we have 375 millimeters on the Xperia 1 Mark 5. So how does this look in comparison to the 1 Mark 4? We can go back to the 125 millimeters, which is 5.2 times, which is like this, and then 85 millimeters, which looks like this. And then let's go to the one-time zoom lens, which looks like this. It's a brand new sensor, the dual layer stacked sensor from Sony, which allows you to capture a little bit more light thanks to the dual layer that they have there, because the pixels are a bit bigger there and can take a little bit more light in. And of course this one has also a larger kind of sensor, 1/1.3 inch size, in comparison to the 1/1.7 inch size on the predecessor. What do you think about this one here? I think it's pretty cool. We have a new stabilization. I'm recording of course with Cinetone enabled, so this gives you the nice skin color as well. And of course seamless zoom is enabled, so I can also zoom out here to the ultra wide angle, which is roughly the same, 16 millimeters, and I think it's even the same sensor. It's just like maybe the glass changed a little bit on this one here. Still has autofocus, but not so close up of a focus, so no macro photography with this one here. Yeah, what do you think about the Xperia 1 Mark 5? Here we have the photos. On the left always Xperia 1 Mark 4, on the right always Xperia 1 Mark 5. We start off with the ultra wide angle, where we can see a bit of better dynamic range. At least the foreground is a bit brighter on the 1 Mark 4, but less detailed and sharp as on the 1 Mark 5, which has more details, less noise as well, which is quite interesting. In terms of detail level here, you can see also a bit more processing on the 1 Mark 4, which the 1 Mark 5 doesn't have so much. But it could be the sun hitting the sensor in a different angle there that's causing this. Let's go to the zoom shot, and here I see the most dramatic change. The Xperia 1 Mark 5 is worse than the 1 Mark 4. and you can see it here with the over sharpening at 3.5 times. Yeah, one could argue it's sharper, but it's over sharpening, and this is why everything appears to be a little bit sharper. But especially when we take a look at the down here, you can see how much process it looks like on the 1 Mark V, where the 1 Mark IV keeps it more real, even though it's a bit soft. At 5.2 times it's even worse. Here's the Xperia 1 Mark V is sharp, where the 1 Mark IV is just simply blurry, as you can see here. And you can see it especially also here with the text, where it's just much cleaner on the 1 Mark IV, much more realistic, where there's a bit of sharpening applied to the 1 Mark V, but overall the image is very soft, and the 1 Mark IV is better. Just simply, it's better. And here 15 times you can see the same effect, where the 1 Mark V loses against the 1 Mark V, in my opinion, because just the processing is so bad here. Look how pixelated it looks like on the 1 Mark V. One could argue, yeah, you didn't have AI zoom enabled, but I had double checked that AI zoom was enabled on both here, and this is the result of the 1 Mark V. Definitely something off with the software and processing here, I hope, and not only with the lens. Now let's come to the main highlight, the new main sensor on the 1 Mark V. You can see how much more different this looks like. Same conditions here, but the 1 Mark IV is dimming down the sun a lot, where the 1 Mark V keeps this in here. When we take a look at the HDR effect, yeah, definitely the 1 Mark V better than the 1 Mark IV. You can see some sky clouds here, where he is completely overblown, and the same goes for the rest here. The HDR lifts up the shadows there, which is completely dark here. You could argue it's a bit more realistic on the 1 Mark IV, but I like the 1 Mark V rendering of the image. Sharpness and sharpness applied is almost the same there. I don't see much of a difference there. Also in terms of details, detail level, not much of a difference. Maybe slightly bit better on the 1 Mark V there. When we come to the ultra-wide angle, we have the same better HDR applied on the 1 Mark V in comparison to 1 Mark IV. As you can see, the cloud's more clear. And then also the better sharpening algorithm, or we have a better lens in the center sharpness. The 1 Mark V wins in the ultra-wide angle. And you can see here, yeah, the exposure is roughly the same. But again, like raised up shadows here, and a bit less saturated image green here than on the 1 Mark IV for some reason. But the detail levels maybe tiny bit sharp on the 1 Mark IV here on the side, but on the other side it's completely different way around. So yeah, I would say on par with the slight edge to the 1 Mark V thanks to its processing and changes there. The 1 Mark V also sometimes has a bit of darker exposure with the main camera lens that you can see here. Also we have a bit of more warmer colors there, where the 1 Mark IV keeps a bit more blue here for some reason, but you can see also the details here on the 1 Mark V much more sharper than on the 1 Mark IV. So here you can really see the new Bruce sensor. Just the exposure is a bit off, I would say. It looks more right with the 1 Mark IV. When it comes to close-ups, both don't feature a macro mode, even though the ultra-wide angle has autofocus, but you can get very close with both of them with the main lens. Here we have a bit of more punch to the colors on the 1 Mark V, roughly the same kind of distance to the 1 Mark IV, even though we have the larger sensor, so no issues there with when you want to take macro-like shots or very close-up shots with the 1 Mark V and the brand new sensor, and you get a bit of more HDR and I think a bit more sharpness and clarity here thanks to the larger megapixels and pixel binning. When it comes to the zoom lens, again, this is like, I'm surprised by this, much more processed looking on the 1 Mark V, especially the text, much more natural on the 1 Mark IV. Yes, the 1 Mark IV needed a bit of time to do this, but Sony had the time to do it on the 1 Mark IV and the 1 Mark V now, Gesundheit by the way, and the 1 Mark V now, for some reason is over-processing the 3.5 times zoom and is completely under-processing or underperforming in the 5.2 times zoom. Just look at the picture here and look at the images there. The faces are clearly visible on the 1 Mark IV, where it's not even visible on the 1 Mark V anymore. So it's a bit of a bummer. And then 15 times the same picture here. Yeah, you can clearly see faces here. 1 Mark V, nope. And both, like I said, AI zoom enabled. So there is something going on with the 1 Mark V. Hopefully it's not the lens's fault there on my device, or in general the zoom lens has degraded. When it comes to night shots, the 1 Mark V's main camera sensor is showing its better HDR capabilities. You can see less overblown, more colors in this neon light kind of situation, and I think overall the sharpness is a bit better and the detail level on the 1 Mark V. Then when it comes to the selfies in dark conditions, you can clearly see the better white balance on the 1 Mark V. Otherwise, I think detail levels maybe tiny bit better on the 1 Mark V as well, a bit too yellowish on the 1 Mark IV. Both utilized their displays to illuminate my face there for a short while before taking the shot. Ultra wide angle, we have a different color exposure again, a bit of bluish magenta tone on the 1 Mark IV, 1 Mark V more greenish kind of tone. Better HDR for sure again, so better processing shows here for sure as well. And detail levels, I think a bit better handling of noises there on the 1 Mark V, but this is very close. So yes, the 1 Mark V is better in the ultra wide angle. Zoom lens 3.5 times surprised me, because here the 1 Mark V is going ahead with brightness and the 1 Mark IV is just simply underperformed here. But when we go to the 5.2 times, yeah, brighter on the 1 Mark V again, better processing maybe, but the sharpness on the 1 Mark IV again is like superior to the 1 Mark V, so something's going on there. Maybe they downgraded the lens on the 1 Mark V. Completely darkness on the left, a bit of more details on the Mark V. My toolbox here, complete darkness, but you can see a little bit of things here going on. So the one big upgrade here of the sensor, of the main sensor of the 1 Mark V is showing a little bit of this. Then selfies can also fail sometimes, even in light conditions, both a little bit shaky, but again the color difference here, where it's a bit greenish, it should be warmer, but it's more greenish on the 1 Mark IV. The 1 Mark V has a bit more whitish, bluish kind of tone, and I like the 1 Mark V a bit better. Overall, what could you expect? I'm a bit surprised by the downgrade of the zoom lens. Hopefully Sony will fix it. The ultra wide angle is basically the same, maybe slight differences there with the lens, but it mainly is profiting from the improvements in terms of processing. And of course the major update is the main new sensor with the new dual layer stack, better HDR, but also the algorithm is better there for sure. And very close. So if you have the 1 Mark IV, there's no necessity to upgrade to the 1 Mark V so far. I hope they will upgrade the algorithms with better HDR processing also to the 1 Mark IV, but I don't have high hopes for that. Otherwise the 1 Mark V still has to go through the process of some updates, especially for the zoom lens. Otherwise it's a bit of a downgrade in comparison to the 1 Mark IV. What do you think? Write it down in the comment section. That's everything for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Until the next time. Bye.